Welcome to the Deep Dive. I'm Paul, that guy's Ian, and welcome to Inside Texas YouTube channel, powered by InsideTexas.com. Right now, we're running a flash sale, $1 for 7 days and 50% off your first year. Go join Inside Texas today and make sure you take advantage of it. It's where the best conversations about Longhorn sports are happening. Ian, Texas, number one in the country, undefeated. Probably not been tested the way we anticipated they would be, but all you can do with bad competition is crush and humiliate it. And that's what Texas has done. Georgia, on the other hand, has had a different set of tests. Some of them in the mirror and some of them their opponents. This Georgia not this Georgia football team, but the Georgia program has won 50 games in a row since the COVID year against teams not named Alabama. So Texas is going to try to end that streak on Saturday, and there's some really great matchups that we're going to talk about and break down. Do you have any quick top-line thoughts on this matchup, Ian, before we jump into the Georgia offense?
Yeah, who have they played that's not Alabama?
Alabama, but it's not Alabama. They played Kentucky.
Yeah.
They played
Florida's been down. Kentucky is solid, but whatever. Tennessee, same thing. They beat Michigan in a semifinal very handily one year. That was pretty impressive. They squashed the Frogs, who looked like they were just happy to be there. Well, they didn't actually look that happy to be there for very long, but they got the nothing left Florida State team last year.
Beat a very good Ohio State team in a very close game.
Yes. Also, they beat Ohio State and they beat Alabama in large part because the other team's best receiver was injured during the game in a playoff game.
So now that we've diminished the Georgia legacy, is it fair to say that this is really a 7-5 team and we're going to win by 38 points on Saturday?
That's where I'm going with this.
Good. Perfect. That's exactly the backdrop that we want to set. Georgia, giant fraud. All right.
I'm just saying, everybody's got to get lucky to make the championship. If Texas wins the national championship this year, they could maybe do it without having to beat a top 5 team. It's possible. It's probably not. That's probably not how it'll play out, but it's possible.
In the new playoff system, that would be difficult to pull off, but anything's possible.
But I just think the mythos around Georgia has been a bit overstated, just a bit. But they are extremely good. So
yeah, let's talk about that. So let's talk about this Georgia team. Of course, they're 5-1, ranked 5th in the country. And we want to talk about their offense because this Georgia offense, I think it would surprise the casual college football fan that Texas has a more balanced offense than Georgia. Georgia has been really reliant on Carson Beck to carry this offense. And he's mostly done it. He's mostly delivered. So one of the things that I do think is interesting about Beck this year, Ian, is under Mike Bobo, they are making a concerted effort to get the ball down the field more. Last year, they were more of an intermediate passing offense. Beck didn't throw it down the field a lot. In fact, in 14 games last year, they attempted it deep balls 20 plus, 54 times, right? So not even 4 times a game. So far this year, he's already thrown 41 deep balls in 6 games. So almost 7 a game. He's hit 15 of 41 for 6 touchdowns and 558 yards. So not a high completion percentage, but when he hits, it's going for 37 yards a pop. And that's what you want out of your downfield passing game. The downside is he's been putting the ball in jeopardy much more than he did last year. He's already thrown 5 interceptions, and he tends to throw them in bunches. And so that is kind of an interesting dynamic that we haven't seen from Carson Beck, who's pretty careful and judicious with the ball in 2023. We're seeing a more explosive downfield Carson Beck, who's also giving the other defense the ball more often than he did. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I just looked up that he's averaging about 35 pass attempts per game.
Yep.
their two main running backs combined are averaging about 20 total per game. If we look at, say, like 2022 Georgia, then Stetson Bennett was averaging, I don't have this pulled up, but 454 attempts over 15 games is
just over 30 a game.
Okay, that's still a fair amount, but 5 less. And then their running backs had 150 and 140 carries for their top two, and then they had two other guys over 60.
And Bennett carried it quite a bit himself, at least in key games. So yeah, I do think they have gone to more of a passing bias.
Yes.
They're closer to 60-40 pass run than in years previous, and that's a change. So I think some of that is playing to their strengths. They have an elite pass blocking offensive line. You can tell that just with your eyeballs watching them play, but you can also, that's borne out by the statistics. They've only given up 6 sacks this year, but only one of those sacks is attributable to the offensive line. So that's pretty darn good. Texas fans know what that feels like because that's what our offensive line is like. Really good in pass protection. Run blocking, they haven't been as coordinated. They have a heavy zone bias, Ian. They're pretty much 65-35 zoned gap. But because of some injuries inside, they lost Tate Ratledge, who was their best offensive lineman for a while. He's not going to be back for this game, but I think he will come back this year. They also lost their center for a while, Jared Wilson. They've struggled a little bit in those zone concepts, passing off defenders and being tight and coherent. And that's just a function of injury, I think. I don't think it's a failing. I find their offensive line to be very athletic. So I think it will come together for them at some point, but their offensive run game, not up to the standard, I think, to which they want.
They've been kind of the standard over the last, this 50-0 run, right? That you mentioned. They've been the standard around the country for recruiting athletes on the offensive line and not just size.
Yep.
And they are, you said a heavy zone bias, but the zone that they run is Tom Herman tight zone.
It's duo. It's inside zone. It's right down the field. It's coming right at you.
Combo blocks on your tackles, driving you off the ball. And I can't remember where I was going with that, but they've been it for the last few years. The first question you had to answer against Georgia was, when they come downhill at you with the duo tight zone deal, what on earth are you going to do? And how many bodies do you have to get in there to have a chance?
Yep.
And this year, to your point, that's just not that big of a fear. It's still there. They can still run teams over, but it's not like it was.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about that too is, and this has been a switch with Mike Bobo, Carson Beck really benefits from play action. On play action, kind of like our guy, Quinn Ewers, he's a different quarterback. Straight drop back, he's not as effective or efficient, and the differences are pretty marked. So he's completing 72% of his passes on play action, 10.6 yards per attempt, 7 touchdowns, 0 picks. Straight drop back, 7.7 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. That's a pretty marked difference. But here's the interesting thing, Ian. Georgia has him in straight drop back 2-1 to play action. And I think that's a big reason that they're 76 in the country in third down conversions. They are not converting on third down, and it's sort of been their bane. And, they kind of move all up and down the field, but on key downs, if you can get them in a key down, they're not completing the ball. And it's not that Beck is getting pressured or they're getting sacked. It's just not working. Something's off in the straight drop back pass game. So do you think that has something to do with their receivers or their schemes, or what's going on?
I think it's the receivers. I think it's that they do not have a single clear, they don't have anyone that I think is going to be drafted in the next NFL draft at wide receiver. I think that I teased before we recorded that I think Georgia is having a little bit of an identity crisis. I think the crisis is that they are primarily a drop back passing team, but they don't have NFL receivers. So it's like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Why would you be you should, if you were going to be a straight drop back passing team, you should have NFL receivers. And the guys they got in the portal to help them there were like Colby Young, who's pretty good, but not available.
Not available.
London Humphreys, who's probably more of a play action guy at this point. He's just kind of pure speed and young still. It's not like a developed, polished route runner. And then they had Dominique Lovett from a year before, but he's a slot.
Yeah, he's their number one target in terms of just pure targets. He's mostly a short, intermediate guy. He's a traditional slot. He's good. He might be a guy that gets drafted, actually. I could see maybe late. I don't know.
He could be, but it'll be late, like you said.
Arian Smith has been their deep threat, and he's good at that. He's gotten downfield on people, particularly last week against Mississippi State. Interestingly, he drops 21% of the balls that are thrown his way.
Crazy.
He's had bad hands. And then they have Dylan Bell, Texas product, who's their most physical receiver. He's not like the prototype 6'4" big receiver. He's more like 6'1", 210, 215. Very physical. He's capable of some yak, but he can actually move people around. And you can't guide him on his routes. You can't like push him around. He'll run through you. So that's their main three. And Ra Thomas, like Colby Smith or Colby Young, not available for this game because of a domestic incident. So that's the receiving core. And then what's interesting, Oscar Delp and Ben Urasek, who was the big transfer from Stanford. Urasek doesn't even play for them. And then Delp, who was more of a blocker, still hasn't been much of a presence in their passing game at all.
Yeah, they'll use Lawson Lucky sometimes, who's good. I knew when they lost Brock Bowers, people would be like, well, it's Georgia. They're going to have great tight ends. They do have solid tight ends, but there's not another Brock Bowers. That guy was, I think, the best player in college football when healthy.
I think it's fair to say that Georgia misses their star pass catchers from 2023 a lot more than Texas does. Yeah. And I think most people thought it would be exactly the opposite.
They don't. I mean, you look at their recruiting, they don't recruit to try to field the best wide receivers in the country. That's not a priority for them in recruiting, which I think is understandable if you just go snatch them up in the portal like Sark has done. But they don't really do that either.
Well, they do, actually. But they've actually made bad character and talent evaluations in the portal repeatedly.
Yeah, but they haven't got like an Isaiah Bond. They haven't gotten a Jordan Addison. They don't get those top guys. They try to find value. They're still trying to find value at receiver. And it's like, this has been my thing with their whole run, as good as it's been, is that the name of the game right now is field NFL wide receivers, and then nobody can really say boo about anything you want to do. And Georgia just refuses to do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. We'll see. Because they were able, I think, to develop some good receivers that were, Lad McConkey panned out better than people anticipated.
He was really good.
Yeah, really good. Brock Bowers.
He was a local 3-star. He was like a throw-in to their recruiting class.
Yeah, and then Brock Bowers, probably the most dangerous receiving tight end I've seen in the last couple of decades in college football. So, yeah, I agree with your basic sentiment. Running back, I should mention very briefly before we segue to the defense, Trevor Etienne. I do this every time. Trevor Etienne transferred in from Florida. Very dynamic, 5'9", about 200. For his size and his quickness, he's actually a good tackle breaker. You better bring it when you try to get him on the ground. But he's a pretty adept pass catcher out of the backfield. And then they lost a couple of guys to injury. Texas fans kind of know what that world is like. But they've got Nate Frazier. I think he's the guy that has been also getting some snaps but Etienne's their number one. Frazier is
Yeah.
a young guy, he's freshman from Compton, California, and he runs like a dude's trying to get out of Compton. So he's pretty tough runner, aggressive, fun to watch. But they're not super dominating in their run game.
You gonna keep leaving him out?
Cash
Money Jones.
Yeah, Cash Money Jones did a horns down on their press conference, so that guy can suck it. How about that? I enjoy his little wispy towny mustache.
Didn't get the Texas offer out of Brock, which I had to look up where Brock was. I'd never heard of that place.
Oh, I know where Brock is for other reasons, but yeah, he is straight out of Brock, and the guy that I know that lives in Brock has now disowned him for doing the horns, for daring to do the horns down. So, hey, I want to talk about the Georgia defense here in a second, Ian. But before I do that, I want to talk about your best offense when you're buying a house. And that's having a great mortgage guy in your corner. That guy is Gabe Winslow. You can reach him at 832-557-1095. Why Gabe? Over 2 decades in the industry. He's been on the mortgage side. He's been on the title side. He's got a law degree, former National Merit Scholar. This guy's vastly overqualified to be peddling mortgages, but he's actually really bright, incisive, and hardworking. And getting a guy like that in your corner makes all the difference, not only for the rate that you pay, for the deal that you get, but he's got a lot of expertise in other areas around the purchase of your house. And he has saved dozens of deals with that experience and with that acumen. Give him a call, 832-557-1095. Let's talk about the real puzzle here, Ian. Whatever you want to say about Georgia and their run of the last few years, the Georgia defense has been pretty consistently good. And when they have gotten beaten, it's kind of alarming. It's like shocking to watch it happen, as Ohio State did in that playoff. They've been pretty dominant, particularly in 2022, 2023. And one area where they have figured out football pretty well is get dominant guys up front, get really good corners. And if you could throw in great safeties too and great linebackers, great, you'll take them. But the non-negotiable is dominant defensive linemen and shut down corners who can dominate and disrupt at the point of attack when you want to. So let's talk about the Georgia defense broadly. You and I both sort of know Kirby Smart's philosophy. It's, broadly speaking, stop the run with the least amount of people possible.
Yeah.
And overplay the pass, particularly on key downs, because the idea is get people off the field. So what has been the deal? What is the deal with this Georgia defense? What's their major malfunction? Why are they giving up points to people this year? Why are they struggling at times with Michael Van Buren and Mississippi State throwing deep balls on them? What's going on with this Georgia D, Ian Boyd?
They also they tend to be low in sack numbers year over year. They've had a couple really good defenses where the sack numbers are not what you would think a good defense would be.
They're actually very reminiscent of some of the best Pete Carroll defenses at USC, who also didn't have big sack numbers. Their goal was stops on third down and no explosives.
It's what they were doing at Alabama too in the early 2010s. And Alabama moved a little bit in a different direction when Smart left, and not really to their own benefit. I think all their positions are like just a little less than they normally are. How's that strike you for analysis?
That was deep.
Like their defensive, they don't have the first round defensive tackle. Their defensive line is good, but it's not quite. It's not elite. The linebackers don't have the Roquan Smith, Nakobe Dean, just absolute, arsonist that's flying around and wrecking your plays.
Well, I think they may have had that guy in Smail Mondon, but he is out for this game. He's Georgia's best defender, and he's sort of that guy who's just does everything. He's great in coverage, great in run support. He can blitz, but he is not going to be playing in this game. So I would say, I would venture that their biggest deficiency is defensive tackle vis-a-vis what they had before, and cornerback.
Cornerback for sure.
Specifically at one cornerback position, they've got a guy named Dalen Everett. And Dalen has been targeted 24 times this year. Guess how many completions he surrendered?
24 times. I don't know.
21.
Oh,
Is that good? Now, if you've given up 21 of 24 and maybe you've held him to 141 yards, we might live with that. In fact, that might be good. But he's given up like 280 something yards receiving. Their other corner, who is their number one corner, that's Julian Humphrey. He's good, but not sort of unassailable. They've tried to get in true freshman Ellis Robinson in more. He's very, very talented. I think this would be a bad game to roll out Ellis Robinson and get sort of his big snap christening in front of 105,000 people with the Texas defense. I mean, the Texas offense and our wide receivers. We'll see. And then that safety, they've actually been good. They've got Malachi Starks, who's going to be a clear NFL guy, early round NFL guy. Very complete, sort of off the press image of what you want a safety to look like. 6'1", 205, can run, can hit. But the other safety, it's been interesting. It's KJ Bolden, true freshman. And he's actually been really good. And
I thought you were going to go the other guy, their Michael Taft.
No, Dan Jackson.
Who's actually he's not really the problem. He's pretty good.
No, he's been fine. But they're trying to work in this true freshman more. And one of the things that I've noticed about him is he's learning on the job, obviously. And that's a tough, people talk about Downs, formerly of Bama, now of Ohio State, as like he's always been amazing. Of course, you remember early in that game when Texas played them in Tuscaloosa, we targeted him and we picked on him. Not for talent, but for inexperience. I don't think that this guy, I think he's got a little better football IQ, but I do think that we're going to target KJ Bolden in probably some mental ways, not necessarily physical ways, if that makes sense.
That's Sark's general MO anyway, so why not?
Yeah. I should mention Michael Williams, who's this edge rushing freak for Georgia. He was preseason All-America, 6'5", 250, like 4'5", 40 guy. He's been hurt all year. They've been bringing him back slowly. I think Kirby Smart has been bringing him along slowly, specifically for this game. I think he's going to start. I think he's going to play a full snap load. But as we were kind of talking about before we recorded, who cares? I mean, who hasn't Kelvin Banks shut down when he's matched up against him? He's got a pretty remarkable group of guys in his body bag over his 3 years at Texas. And I don't know. I mean, maybe Michael is such a freak that he's the guy that does beat Banks. Finally he encounters his match. But I wouldn't count on it if I was a Georgia fan.
No, I don't think so. They need to get inside pressure with their linebackers in Quinn's face and see if he will stay in the pocket if they throw bodies in front of him within his vision. Because against Oklahoma, he was bailing on clean pockets when he saw pressure, when he saw blitzers coming.
Yeah, guys like, and their defensive tackles, guys like Nazir Stackhouse, Miller, Brinson, they really need to come up big in that regard and at least push the pocket if they're not going to get through. We've been very good in pass protection, particularly on the interior. DJ Campbell has taken big steps forward as a pass blocker this year. And Hayden Connor's always been great. Jake Majors obviously is a vet. You're not going to just, run by him. That's going to be a big part of pushing that because, Quinn, frankly, was poor against Oklahoma. He was subpar. Sark had schemed him up a 350-yard passing day with 3 touchdowns. And, he didn't deliver on it. So, interestingly, I think he's got a chance to practice, to get more confident, to rally, and reclaim his mechanics, because that was the biggest issue. I didn't think he had trouble seeing things against OU. I don't think they were confusing him. I think his mechanics were bad, and he threw some bad balls.
Yep. But both of the big throws that everybody noticed him missing early in the game were just throwing off the back foot and not stepping in. He knew exactly where the ball needed to go both times.
Sure did.
And it wasn't that hard, honestly, but he had it. He had him dead to rights, and he just missed.
Yeah, and on a couple of other throws near the red zone,
Yeah.
they were touchdowns that Sark had schemed up consecutively, and he had a weird hitch in his motion. And in fact, you saw Sark mouthing to him as he's coming off, like, just throw it. What are you doing? And Quinn was just kind of shaking his head, like, I don't know. I don't know what I did. Sorry. So
What's your bet? Do you think Quinn will bounce back, or do you think he'll need another week or two because of the nature of the injury?
I don't know. The joke that I like to make about an oblique is that the player will never be straightforward about the injury, right? But I don't know. I truly don't know. I don't have an insight into this. If it was, a high ankle, I might be able to reason through it based on past information, and you can always get an injection. You can't really do that. You can't really medically manage your oblique. I mean, it's not an isolated part of your body that you can sort of deal with for 3 hours medically and then deal with the recovery after when you're in pain. It's just a weird injury. It's a torque injury. It's a flexion injury. Something like baseball pitchers get more often than quarterbacks. I am literally betting that we will see more of the Quinn we're used to against Georgia, but truly, I don't know.
I've been comparing it to, like, if you have like a stiff back and you're like, I don't want to lift that without help, or I don't want to bend over, or I don't want to go for that catch playing with my son because I don't know what's going to happen and I don't want to risk it. That's what he looked like in week 1 to me. And week 1 coming back, against Oklahoma. And I think that's why Sark had that called run for him on the goal line. Because I think Sark wanted him to feel some contact and be like, oh, I'm still okay.
You didn't die, yeah.
And then, whatever, the boom
that's
time.
That's the fun part of Sark that I love is people see the California cool. They see the fact that he's like a nice, cool guy, like fun to interact with. You'd like to hang out. You'd like to go have dinner with Sark, right? Beneath that, he's very old school football. And he thinks it's hilarious when quarterbacks make mistakes in practice and get blown up. Like, he laughs at them and he'll tell them, like, you deserve that. Like, that's an aspect of Sark I don't think people know. And you saw it with Jaden Blue. Like, I'm going to show you the difference between hurt and injured. And against ULM, you're going to carry the ball 25 times, even though you should already be out, with a juice box. And I think he kind of probably did that. I think you're dead on with the Quinn run. I think, one, it was the easiest way to score a touchdown because OU wasn't expecting it. But I think there was a secondary motivation, which is let's get him hit and realize he's fine. And I think the other part of this that is big that I've experienced in much lower levels of competition and much lower stakes, but adrenaline is magical. And if you're playing at home against Georgia in front of 105,000 people and there's freaking laser light show and all the pageantry and it's a night game and you're hyped, it's kind of amazing how your injuries can kind of disappear for a few hours. And then they come back with a vengeance around midnight, when your adrenaline's worn off. But, there's an element of that as well. So we'll see. We'll have to see.
There was had to have been a lot of adrenaline in the Cotton Bowl, though.
True. Yeah. I think
hopefully now he knows. Like, I'm going to be okay. I'm not going to die if someone hits me. And he's just, more comfortable.
Well, and truthfully, he doesn't want to go out. I mean, for many reasons, but he's going to be a first-round draft pick. He loves the University of Texas, and he wants to deliver wins for them as their quarterback. He doesn't want Arch to come in.
Let's throw some red meat out there.
Oh, okay.
If, let's say, Quinn first drive he gets hit, like we miss a Georgia inside linebacker blitz and just boom right in the stomach, and the next couple of throws he's shaky and he's like, I don't know, and so they go Arch, and then Arch just torches Georgia.
Oh, wow.
This is
how we should have started. We should have started this YouTube because it would have been clipped. It would have gone viral. We would have gotten all the algorithms would have sought it out. Come on, Ian. we're gonna do this.
Sorry.
Let's do it early. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Does Quinn, when he's healthy, get the job back, or is that a sorry, man?
So we've got a hypothetical built on a hypothetical. It's a Jenga of hypotheticals.
Yeah. Choose carefully.
You've taken out a HELOC loan to lease a Land Rover, is what you've done right here, metaphorically. So I think at that point, you're probably going to roll with the guy that delivered the big win, right?
Yeah. I've been saying I don't think they pull Quinn for Arch unless they're about to lose and miss the playoffs, or they're about to lose a playoff game. And he's playing bad, obviously. And he's
you have to have really big stakes to go back. I mean, because also look, we are prisoners of the moment as fans, but every great quarterback plays at least one game every year where you're like, is this guy point shaving? Like, what is going on? Vince Young did it. Colt McCoy did it. I mean, Arch Manning will do it next year when we'll say, man, I wish we had Quinn back to throw those intermediate balls. Arch is, I don't know what he was looking at. I mean, that's guaranteed. So to just abandon the guy who's started and you've groomed and knows the system and really is at this point a master of it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
His issue is not like, ooh, I don't know what's going on. This moment's too big for me. I'm confused. His issue was, as we said, mechanical. He just made bad throws. So if he gets more confident and that improves, Sark's not going to do a knee jerk, pull him out of the game because there's a ball tip volleyball interception early in the game that's not even his fault, right? But the average fan will be in the stands like, get him out, get in Arch. And you just have to resist that as a coach.
Unless you're Brent Venables, then you lean into it and just mortgage your future as a coach.
Do you think Brent Venables watched the Oregon-Ohio State game? Just chewing on his fingernails?
Why? Because
Dylan Gabriel played his butt off.
Gabriel played pretty good.
Yeah, he played really well against the defense that I thought would probably unmask him, and the defense got unmasked on that.
I'm still waiting on the cold weather, but my brother texted me during the game, and he was like, "Dylan Gabriel seems to be a lot better than you said he would be."
I like that he kept receipts on you, Ian. Well, you guys should absolutely keep receipts on this deep dive and our analysis. I'm sure we'll hear from you in the comments, and maybe some stray Georgia fans will wander in. We had a lot of OU fans wandering in, and none of them have showed back up, interestingly. Hey, I know a place you need to show up. It's Inside Texas. You can join right now. This flash sale, $1 for 7 days, 50% off your first year. Sounds like a good deal to me. And of course, you can find Ian at his Substack, America's War Game. If you like my nonsense, you can find me on the Everyone Gets a Trophy podcast with sometimes Ian, sometimes Randy Boone, sometimes a degenerate gambler, professional gambler named Eric. But it's always good fun. And finally, hook 'em horns and beat the dogs.